Hello, everybody. My name is Adam Martin, and this right here, this beautiful book is my book, The People of Dragon Tree. And if you are watching this today, it is officially published. It is out there into the world, and I am incredibly excited about it. So I've been working on this book for almost 2 years now, and I'm so excited that it is all done. The whole publishing process, it took a lot longer than I thought it would have, and it was a lot more challenging than I thought it was going to be as well. So I thought it would be fun to go through my entire process with publishing this book, all the way from writing it to editing it to getting all the covers set up and everything online to actually publishing the book. Now, I'm not saying that this is the best way to publish a book. This is just what I did. Like, I know I made some mistakes along the way, and there's totally going to be some stuff that I do differently for my second book. This is just the way that I did it, and it worked for me for the most part. All right, let's get into it. This is the entire process for creating and publishing The People of Dragon Tree. So the original idea for the story came in my capstone class for script writing in college. I had to write a 40-page script of a movie or a TV show, and I had this really cool idea, at least a cool idea that I thought, for a TV show about this boy who was kidnapped by this corrupt king, and every single episode of the TV show, he gains a little more leeway in that society. Like, he starts out as like a servant, and then he might move his way up to being like a chef or a soldier, with the eventual goal of taking down the king at the end of the story. I ended up coming up with a way better idea for that class, so I kind of shelved the idea with the intent of coming back to it later. So I graduated, and a few years went by, and when COVID hit, I didn't have anything to do, so I went back to that idea and quickly realized that I didn't really like it. Like, it felt clunky and unrealistic. Like, I liked parts of it. Like, I liked the character of the corrupt king and the character of the boy getting kidnapped. So I got rid of almost everything else and kept those two characters. I also kept the setting of the story, which is, a time period with like swords and shields with a castle and all that kind of stuff. I liked that idea. So I have two basic characters. I have, the corrupt king and the boy who gets kidnapped. I have the basic setting of a castle and a kingdom. So I decided to go with two more main characters and then build the story around those two characters. The two characters I went with were a princess who is completely oblivious to the corruption of her father, the king, and then a soldier, a general in this royal army that is the only girl in the entire royal army. I really like the idea of this female general trying to, defeat the prejudices of this all-male army, and the fact that she was already in a position of power. So I had my basic main characters. It was time to fill out the world building a little more. So since I have this general in this royal army, I filled out, the hierarchy of the military. I had this boy who got kidnapped, so I filled out a reason why he got kidnapped and connected it back to the army. So the world was kind of starting to come together. And in my head, I had this basic idea for the story. So I decided, why not? I may as well start writing the story right now. Just to add a little context, at this point, I had only ever written movie and TV show scripts. I had not written any prose whatsoever. I had no outline. I had basically no plan. I had, 4 or 5 bare bones characters and a setting. And I very quickly realized how much my lack of planning was really going to affect my story. But I jumped into writing it, and I got maybe like 5 pages in when I realized that I knew nothing about any of these characters. Like, those 5 pages were super bare bones and bland with characters that didn't have a lot of personality traits. So I needed to learn more about my characters. So this is when I first did research online about what other people have done. And when it comes to figuring out your characters, a big thing that I saw was writing a list of like every single little thing you know about your characters. That could be from physical descriptions to personality traits to like anything you know they're going to say or do during the story. A lot of people call these character sheets. I've heard them call other things. I'm just going to call them character sheets. So I decided to write character sheets for all of my characters, and I quickly realized that I hated it. Not like what I was writing. I liked what I was writing. I just really hated the process of creating these character sheets. So I realized I needed to do something different. Since I had all the time in the world, I thought it would be fun to write some short stories for my 3 main characters. And hopefully that would let me, really dig into their minds. Like these short stories, they were going to have no planning. It was just going to be totally off the cuff, write whatever was in my head and felt right to the characters at the time. And hopefully that would help me learn and get a better understanding of what these characters want, what they're going to do in the story, all that kind of stuff. So I decided to start with the military general, who I guess I can just call Morgan now because the book is out. I started with her because I liked that character the most, and I felt like I had the best idea of what happened to her in the past, which is what I was going to write the story about. So I started writing, and I kept going and going and going. And this short story quickly turned into a novella that capped out at like 35,000 words. So I realized that if I ever wanted to get the actual book written, I was not going to be able to write these novellas for the other 2 characters. But during that time of writing the novella, I thought a lot about these other characters. So I felt like I had a pretty good grasp on them, at least enough to write the story or an outline of the story. So I just scrapped the other 2 short stories. But, at the end of it, I still do have this really cool novella of one of my 3 main characters. So I am glad I wrote that. So something else I realized while writing the novella was that I was going to need an outline for the actual novel. Like writing the novella was fine because I was just trying to figure out the characters and it wasn't that long. So it wasn't a big process to like change parts of the story if I wanted to. But if I was going to write this 100,000 word book, I absolutely was going to need an outline. So I wrote my outline for the whole book. It was very, very detailed. Like I had a lot of bits of dialogue in there. I had super in-depth of this person talks to at this time. Like it was way over detailed. But at the time, like looking back, I'm glad I had a super detailed outline for my first book because it kind of got rid of any writer's block that I would have had, but I'm definitely going to have a less detailed outline for my second book. With that, I had my characters, I had my outline. It was time to actually start writing. So it was time to start writing my book, and originally I was going to write it in Google Docs, but I very quickly realized I did not want to do that, mainly because Google Docs doesn't have a dark theme. It was just so much white on the screen, and I knew it was going to hurt my eyes. So I decided to not do Google Docs and look for a different writing software. That was when I discovered Campfire Writing from a YouTuber that I follow. It's a nice software that has a lot of good world building stuff and a place to write your book. So I checked it out and I really liked it. It's a good software. It even has a dark mode. So if you know anything about Campfire, it is a free service if you don't want all of it. So if you were going to write an entire book from start to finish with, 100,000 words, Campfire for free would not cut it. They only allow a certain number of words to be written without paying for it. But as I went along, I really started to like Campfire with all of their world building stuff. So I did pay for some of Campfire, mainly the manuscript part where I can write as many words as I want. And I do not regret that at all. I really like the software, so I put some money into it. I am happy with that. But yes, if you know Campfire at all, they have different modules like religion and, different locations and characters. So you can put all of your world building stuff in there. I didn't really use any of the extra modules at all because I kind of already did the world building on Google Docs when I was just like messing around and also with my short story. So the only thing I really did was put my outline in, and then I wrote all of my actual physical words for the book in Campfire. However, for my second book, I have been using all the modules for world building, and I like that a lot, especially the character modules. So the actual writing of the book was really interesting. I enjoyed it a lot. It was probably my favorite part of the book, but it was interesting because I had this super detailed outline, right? So like I said before, it cured any kind of writer's block that I would have, but it also kind of, put a chokehold on my creativity because I had this super detailed outline. Like I couldn't really veer off the outline much because I had this big worry that if I did, it would, basically make the rest of my outline worthless. And I put so much time into this outline, I didn't want to make it worthless. Now, obviously, I learned later that's not true, but this is my first book. I knew nothing about any of this, and that is like the mindset that I was stuck in. So the writing of this book took around 6 months or, somewhere right around there. And when I was done, I was super excited. I mean, this was the longest single thing I had ever worked on, and I made it through. I finished the whole thing, but I was also surprisingly relieved. Like I was just very happy and like, oh my gosh, this thing is done. I can move on to the next part, So I was excited, but I was also really relieved. And I thought it was good from what I remembered. During the writing process, I didn't go back and reread any of the chapters. I just kind of kept going off the outline, didn't go back because I felt like if I went back, I probably would have edited the book and it would have just been this constant cycle of writing 3 chapters and editing it and rewriting it again, and it would have just never ended. Like my 6 months timeline of writing this book could have taken, 8 months to 12 months. But now that I was done with writing, it was time to move on to editing. So editing was easily the worst part of the entire book, and a lot of it came from my own inexperience with editing, but we'll get into that. So when I finished the first draft of the book, I knew I really liked it, but I also knew there'd be a lot of things wrong with it that I would have to change, mainly on the grammar side. But going back to the advice that I got online, a lot of people said that once you finish your first draft, just totally shelve it for like a month or even up to like 6 months, just so you can kind of disconnect from the story. And when you go back to editing, you can go in with fresh eyes. And that made a lot of sense to me. So I was originally going to do that. But as I took the time off, I was way too excited to get back into it. So I let it sit for a little bit, but it wasn't a month. It was only a week. So my eyes going back into the editing weren't super fresh and disconnected from the story, but I couldn't help it. Maybe next time I'll wait a little longer, but this time I only waited a week. And yes, I was excited to get back into the editing, but another big reason that I wanted to get into it was because I knew I was going to hate editing. And that was mainly, like I said, just because of my own inexperience with it, but it was more like I just wanted to get it over with. So I really didn't have an idea of how to go about editing this book. Like I knew I had to get the grammar right, and I knew I had to get the story right. But the problem was that I didn't really know what the story needed at the time. I hadn't reread it yet, so I could have done that, but I decided to fix all the grammar first, just because I knew that was way more straightforward. And then as I went through the grammar, hopefully I would realize what the story needed. So I started with the grammar, and what I did was I just read through the entire book from start to finish, and I marked up every single grammar error that I saw. Now, if you're interested, I did it with printing out the whole book and marking it with a red pen. That was what my professor for script writing did. It's kind of just what I latched on to, but I'm definitely not going to do that next time because that was way too much paper that I used to print all this book off. During this time, I also had my wife reading the book. She is way better at grammar than I was, and she was also kind of my beta reader because, like, as she went through, I asked her questions like, "Oh, what'd you think of this character? Do you think that made sense? Who do you like? Who do you dislike?" All that kind of stuff. So with the story edit, I read a lot of advice online about cutting out a decent chunk of your book during the story edit because it's all unnecessary stuff. So I went into my story edit thinking that, but there really wasn't a lot of stuff that I wanted to cut. Like it was kind of just a sentence here or a sentence there. I did, however, end up adding stuff. Like I didn't change any major storylines or really any minor ones, to be honest. Like, could I have changed stuff? Yeah, but I was happy with it. You know, it's my story, so I'm gonna make it the way I want to make it, regardless of the advice online. The hardest part about the editing story wise was like there's no right way to edit your story. Like, yeah, there's stuff that you can add that other people have put in, like best practices, but there isn't a way to look at a story and be like, yes, that is absolutely wrong, or yes, that is absolutely right. Like, it's all your instinct, you know, it's what I feel is right, and I have to trust myself. And that was a pretty scary part of this whole process. Like, what if I'm wrong? What if other people hate it? That kind of thing. So I was feeling okay about the story edits. Like, it was nerve-wracking, but I was feeling okay about it. But the big problem was the grammar, man. Like, I've probably read through this book 7 times, you know, a ridiculous amount of times, going for grammar almost every single time, and I'm still finding grammar that is wrong. Like, it is so unbelievably frustrating. So I knew that I just wasn't going to be able to find everything with just reading through grammar wise. So I decided to download Grammarly, which is just this basic grammar app that goes into your web browser and checks everything that you type to see if it is proper grammar. So Grammarly was great for like the basic stuff like commas or, you know, wrong spelling, stuff like that. But Grammarly wasn't great for prose writing. Like, you know, we've all read really flowery books, you know, that isn't necessarily perfect grammar, but it does make sense in the context of the book. So it was kind of like a give and take. Like, yeah, okay, that advice is good. I'll use that. But no, I really want it to sound like that, so I'm going to keep that. Like, so Grammarly is great in that regard, but it also has its flaws. So if you use Grammarly like I did, just make sure you're careful about, you know, it changing your prose so much that it no longer sounds like the book you want it to sound. But the biggest thing that Grammarly was so amazing for was commas, like putting commas where they belong, or especially getting rid of commas where they don't belong. Like, I am convinced that I am just never going to know how to properly use a comma. Like, I could study grammar for 20 years and I'm still not going to know when to use a comma or not. Like, commas are my kryptonite. Definitely my kryptonite. So the editing was definitely the most tedious part of the book. But there are some things that I would do differently for my second book. So let's get into those. The first thing is going to be going through my story edits first. And mainly because, like, you know, if you do your grammar edits, like, okay, so your book's good on grammar, but then you're going to go back and change the story, thus creating new words, thus creating more opportunities for messing up your grammar. So story edits first, then grammar edits once the story is exactly where you want it to be. And hopefully the next time I go through the editing process, I'll just have less grammar to do in general because, you know, I've gained more knowledge of grammar as this time has gone on. So hopefully there's less. Except the commas. There's, oh my gosh, so many commas. So something pretty common in the book publishing space is beta readers. And that is something I didn't do. I mean, I kind of did with my wife, but she doesn't really know anything about crafting a story. She's more just, you know, grammar and then does she like it or does she not like it kind of thing. And I didn't do any beta readers this time, mainly because I had like a little bit of imposter syndrome. Like, I didn't want to waste the beta readers' time with my crappy book, you know? So I just scrapped the beta readers, but I do think next time I'm going to be adding some beta readers for sure. So another common practice in self-publishing a book is line editors, getting a line editor, which is basically someone that just goes through your entire book line by line, making sure the grammar is right. Some of them also do story, but a lot of the time it is just the grammar. The reason I didn't do this was strictly monetary. Like, you know, I looked up some line editors, but they were just so expensive, and I wanted to do it for free because I'm very, very cheap. So I kind of realized that there might be some grammar edits in the final product, but I did as good as I could. We'll see where I'm sitting monetarily for the next book that I release to see if I do a line editor or not, but they can be very expensive. So that's basically all I have for editing. Let's move on to making the cover. So the cover was something that I was super excited about, but also kind of dreading. Like, I was really excited about it because, it's my book cover. It's what represents the book. And it kind of gave me the feeling of legitimacy when I first saw my cover, like that it was a real book and not just a Google Doc or a Campfire document on my computer. I was dreading it because I was worried about how much it would cost. Now, I know publishing a book takes money. I understand that, but that doesn't mean I can't be cheap and still worried about how much it can cost. So the first website I went to was called Reedsy, which offers a whole bunch of different stuff when it comes to creating a book, like book covers, for example. So what you do is you look up different cover artists and they say, what they're proficient in, and you get to see all the stuff that they've done in the past, and you send them a request to see if they would be able to do your book cover or not. Some are accepting applications, some are not. It's all just in their bio. So when these artists get back to you, they'll be like, hey, yeah, I'm interested. What's your book about? All that stuff, blah, blah, blah. And it's just a good setup. I like the website. So when someone finally got back to me that I liked, we talked about the book cover, and I quickly realized that I wanted my book cover illustrated, not, created with certain images or whatever. And that is not something that my person that I contacted did. So we cut it off, but she directed me towards other artists. But looking at these artists, they seemed just a little too expensive for me, so I decided to start looking through other websites. So that's when I found myself on a website called MibbleArt. So it looks like a pretty solid website. They make book covers, but what really attracted me was the price. The price seemed very, very affordable, and the book covers looked good for the price that they were offering. So I decided to go with MibbleArt, but what was interesting about it is that you don't talk with a specific artists. You go through like a middleman. Now, I know the website is based in a different country, so it might be a language thing, but it also might be a thing like preventing their artists from getting hate. I'm not really too sure, but overall, it was a really good experience. So what you do is you pick your style, you pick how many characters you want, how detailed it is, all that kind of stuff, and you send it off to the website, and they give you an initial sketch within 14 business days. So I'm not sure if you guys know how long 14 business days is, but when you're waiting for something like a sketch of your cover, 14 business days is an eternity. But after the 14 business days, they sent me my sketch, and here it is. This is what they got back to me with. I liked it. It was awesome. It was exactly what I wanted, so I gave them the okay to keep going. Next, they move on to the coloring process. So after however long, I'm not sure how long it was, but I know it was shorter than the 14 business days. They sent me my first color sketch, which was this. And once again, I like it a lot. It was almost exactly what I wanted. They asked me if I had any notes on it, and I only really had one. I thought the line on his neck for his shirt was a little too high, like it almost felt like a turtleneck. So I asked them to lower that, and then a few days later they sent me this sketch, which has the lower neckline, which is fantastic. This is when I really started to get excited about my book. Like, this is the book cover. The only thing it's missing is all the words. Like, this is what the image is going to be, which is super exciting. The next step is deciding what I wanted on my spine and my back cover. They asked for an image, like a basic layout of what I wanted for my back cover. So I sent them this, which is a great sign that I am an amazing artist and I should draw my own book cover next time. But they made my back book cover and the spine, and it was awesome. But it was at this point when they needed to know what size of book I was going to make, be it, a trade paperback or a mass market paperback or a hardcover, just so they could have the correct size of the actual image. They also needed to know how many pages my book was going to be, just so they could create the spine as the right size. So at this point during the process, you needed to know how many pages it was. So the editing had to be almost done. At least like the major story edits had to be done, so you could have a really good estimate of how big or how many pages the book was going to be. So they finally sent me a completed folder with all of my files in it. It had my paperback design with all the words on it. It had my Kindle design. It had even some really cool promotional photos, which I wasn't expecting. I can show you guys some that are on the screen right now. And I was really satisfied with MibbleArt. I really liked it. I'm definitely going to go back to them again for future books. It was just a great service. It was a great service. So I have the finished manuscript. I have the finished book cover. It was now an incredibly important decision I had to make. Where was I going to sell this book? So the obvious answer is Amazon. They are the big dog when it comes to buying books online, easily the most popular website. But there were more questions added on top of that. Am I going to put it elsewhere besides Amazon, and who was going to put it on Amazon? So a lot of self-published authors go through Ingram Spark. They are a service that helps you publish the book to all these different websites, and they also publish the ebook to different websites like Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Google Books, all that kind of stuff. Another option of mine was to just do Amazon, like do Amazon.com and Kindle, like just them. And there were some pros and cons to doing both of those. So I had two big deciding factors when it came to deciding where my book was going to go. How much money would I get per book, and where people actually buy their books. So if you go with just Amazon and nowhere else, they give you a significantly bigger percentage of the money that you make through royalties. Like I'm talking like 30% versus 70% if you just do Amazon. Like that's a big chunk of change. Now I know this book isn't all about making money, but this is my first book. I'm a self-published author. It might make a difference in the long run. And the same thing goes with Kindle. Kindle is by far the most popular place along with Amazon. Like when you buy a book online, your first instinct is, you want to what? I want to buy a book. I'm going to go to barnesandnoble.com. I know some people do, but Amazon is just by far and away the most popular place. Now, I've seen a lot of self-published authors share their numbers, and, if 85% of everything they sell is either on Amazon or Kindle, is it really worth putting the book elsewhere to potentially make less money than if you did just Amazon and Kindle? Now, I don't really like how Amazon does this. Like that is such a big difference between putting it just on Amazon and putting it elsewhere. But it's their choice. They're the big dogs. I hope it changes in the future, but for now, this book is only on Amazon and Kindle. So I set up my account on Amazon. It's through Kindle Direct Publishing is like the brand for it all. It's super easy to, create books and series, and you have to fill out your tax information and your bank information and all that. Very easy process. I'm super relieved that was nice and easy. So once you put the book in, you have to choose if you want a paperback or a hardback. You just got to make sure you choose the same one that you chose your cover artist for. So the next big thing that they're going to have you do is upload the manuscript, the formatted manuscript of your book. The key word there being formatted. You can't just upload, a Google Doc or a PDF of whatever. Books are formatted a specific way with the margins and that kind of. So there are a lot of different software that help you format your book. Like you could even do it in Word if you really wanted to. I just know it'd be a hassle. Thankfully, Campfire Writing has a super seamless way of formatting your book for publishing on ebook or paperback hardcover. So with all the specifics, I just went with the recommended stuff that I found on my research, as well as found on the Amazon Kindle Direct Publishing website anyway. This is when you would go crazy with, your fonts and your formatting, but I just went pretty basic, like what they recommend wise with like fonts and margins and stuff like that. Everything except for one thing, which we'll get into with just a sec. But for this book, I just went with the basic stuff. So you upload the formatted manuscript into Amazon, and it does this big check to see if it like fits their standards and stuff. Takes a few minutes, but the only thing that it didn't work with my formatting was the margins. You can't have the words too close to the edges on the four sides of the page. So I just kept reformatting the book, moving it, millimeter by millimeter on the margins until it was perfect. It passed Amazon's thing. I was all set. So at this point, you can set your publication date and, officially publish your book. But I definitely recommend you order proof copies. Proof copies are just cheap copies that Amazon or Ingram Spark or whoever sends you to make sure they printed it correctly, it looks good on the inside, all that kind of stuff. So I ordered 3 proof copies of my formatted manuscript, and they came within a few days. It was pretty quick, actually. So here it is. Here is my first proof copy of my book. It was incredibly exciting to see this thing actually in real life. Oh, I was so excited. But you do need to put on your inspective goggles for your proof copies because this is your book. You want it to be absolutely perfect. So look at the cover, see if it was put on there correctly, look at the fonts and the spacing and the margins, just make sure everything is exactly how you want it to be. And I'm serious about this. Like, be really critical here. You have spent so many hours on this book, and I've spent so many hours on this book, that you want it to be perfect, exactly how you want it. And mine wasn't. Mine was not perfect. Like, the cover looked fantastic, the spine was awesome, but the actual inside I wasn't a big fan of. Like, the words in the middle towards the spine were way too close to the spine. And if you are like me and you dislike having creases on the spine of your book, this is just an absolute no-go. Like, you'd get creases for sure reading this. So I knew I had to change that. And also, I wasn't a big fan of the line spacing of my book. Like, I thought the lines were a little too far apart. Like, I felt like I could fit physically more lines on my book. So those were the two big things that I had to change. And this is when I discovered my big mistake with formatting my manuscript the first time. I had no gutter. So if you don't know what the gutter is, it is an extra margin on just the spine of your book to make the words go a little farther away from the spine. So, you know, the spine doesn't inhibit your view of the words at all. I didn't have that at all. So I added a gutter. I changed the font to hopefully have a little more words on the page. And I ordered 2 more proof copies. And here is my second proof copy. I know it looks so different from the outside, but I swear on the inside it looks different. I changed the 2 things that I mentioned, and I still didn't quite like them. So on the pictures, hopefully you can see what I'm talking about, but the gutter was almost too big now. Like, the words were too far away from the center of the page. And the font, yes, there was more words per page, but it looked just a little too sci-fi-y. Like, the font I could see work really well in like Dune or a Star Wars book or something like that, but not really my soft fantasy book, you know? So I changed my gutter again. I changed the margins a little bit, and I changed the font back to something that I liked a little more. So I had the option of ordering proof copies for the 3rd time, but the main reason why I wanted to order the proof copies was to make sure the actual like book cover with like the spine and stuff looked good and was right. So I knew the inside was going to look fine. I knew if I just changed the gutters a little bit and the font a little bit, the inside would still look fine. And I made the very nerve-wracking decision to not order more proof copies. Like, I was confident it was all going to work out, but it's still nerve-wracking because I technically haven't seen the final product of my book until it actually comes out, and I can order author copies, but it'll be fine. Crisscrossing my fingers on that one. It'll be fine. So my physical book was all set up. Now it was time to set up the ebook. So once again, there are a lot of software options when it comes to setting up your ebook. I just chose the default Amazon one, which is called Kindle Create. So it was incredibly easy to set up your ebook on Kindle Create. But I did have a problem starting off. I needed my manuscript to be in a doc file format, and Campfire does not do that. So I had to transfer chapter by chapter over to a Google Doc and then download it as a doc format file. And that was very tedious, but that was just a super minor gripe, little roadblock that I went through when it comes to this giant process of publishing this book. So once it was actually in Kindle Create, it was a super easy process. Like, you basically just had to say, you know, this is where the chapter starts. This is the chapter title. This is the font I want. This is how the table of contents is going to look. Like, super easy. This was easily the quickest and most painless part of the entire publishing process. So I uploaded the document to the Kindle Direct Publishing website, and my Kindle was all good to go. The ebook was ready. So there were 2 things left for me to do: ISBNs and the pricing. So ISBN stands for International Standard Book Number. It's basically the number that the government gives your book in this giant database. It's just a way to search it, a way to keep track of it. Pretty basic. You need them to publish your book. Technically, you would do this before you sent out the proof copies or maybe after, whatever. You just need to do it before you can physically publish your book on Amazon. So there are two options for your ISBNs. Amazon has free ones, or you can buy them either individually or in bulk on the official website. Now, a lot of other YouTubers have pros and cons about Amazon's ISBNs versus buying your own. I'm not going to get into any of that, but just know that I bought 10 ISBNs on the website for, I think it was around $300, maybe just a little less. So a huge thing, and the last thing I had to do before publishing my book was figuring out the price. So when you put the book on Amazon, they give you the minimum and maximum prices that you can sell your book at. And that's just because, Amazon has to print it, they get a cut, and you get whatever is left. So you can't necessarily charge this giant tome of a book at $2.99 because it wouldn't be worth it for Amazon to print it. So it's kind of a balancing act of price. Like, you want it to be cheap enough where it's easy for people to buy, but you also don't want it to be so cheap where you make literally zero money off of this book. So there are a lot of YouTube videos out there about pricing your book. It basically comes down to the type of book you have, like the genre, how long the book is, page count, and if it is paperback or hardback or ebook. Now, a lot of the advice that I saw online was about making it as cheap as possible to incentivize people to buy it. But I don't necessarily feel great about that. Like, this is your book. You know how much this book means to you, and you don't necessarily want to sell yourself short, because people might see this incredibly cheap book and be like, it's probably not very good because the author sold it for so cheap. So it really is a balancing act, but go with your gut. If you feel like your book is worth a certain amount, do your research about that amount, but still go with your gut on what you feel your book is worth. I ended up with the price of $14.99 for my trade paperback book that is a little over 420 pages long. Do with that information what you will. This is just what I decided to do. So ebook wise, you can choose a different price, and I would definitely choose doing less. I did a lot of research online about what other self-published authors put their ebook as, and I decided to go with $3.99 for my ebook. And since I'm putting it only on Kindle, I do get a decent amount of kickback on that price. So you also have the option of putting your ebook on Kindle Unlimited, which is basically if people have the Kindle Unlimited subscription, they can download your book for free, and you get paid per page read of that ebook. Now, it's way more complicated than that. There are a lot of really good YouTube videos, once again, about this subject. I will veer you towards that direction if you want more information. So you have your ISBNs, you have your proofs, you have your ebook all set up, everything's all priced out. You can now finally click that publish your book button. So your book is out. The thing that you really do after publishing your book is advertise. So I don't really have a lot to say on this because I don't know a lot. I do not plan on paying for any advertising until I know way more about the advertising world. I'm just gonna, post on social medias and make a YouTube video like this one. And that's really all I'm gonna do until I know a lot more about it. Once I do, I will probably pay for some advertising, but until then, So here we are. My book is out. I still only have the proof copies. You can see this not for resale thing right in the middle of it. I don't have my physical book yet because I'm making this before the book comes out. But man, I'm so happy this is done. I'm incredibly excited about the book. I've worked on this thing for so long, but like I said earlier when I finished the first draft, I am very relieved that this process is over. Now, I'm still going to advertise it. My work on the book isn't done, but I'm very happy to not be writing it anymore. I'm very happy to not be editing it anymore. Now I get to just put it out into the world and see what people think about it. And that is the most exciting part and the most terrifying part of this whole thing about finding what people will think about this book, getting it in people's hands. Oh my gosh, I'm very excited and very nervous. So thank you for sitting through this YouTube video about my entire process. Oh man, it's time. It's done. The book is out there. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys pick up The People of Dragon Tree. I think it's a really good book. Instead of me just talking about it, I will read you the back cover of the book. But hope you guys enjoy it. We'll talk to you later. This is what The People of Dragon Tree is about. A soldier loses her position and is forced to train bondsmen. A princess deals with a rebellion as well as her father, and a captured bondsman tries to take them all down from the inside. In the capital city of Stella-Lethal, the queen is kidnapped by rebels against the royal family. As a counterattack, the royal family takes children of suspected rebels as bondsmen. One of those bondsmen, Jonah, learns of the rebellion and attempts to help them from the inside. Morgan, the only woman in a position of power in the royal army, gets demoted and is forced to train a group of bondsmen to become soldiers. Leilani, the princess, deals with the growing unrest in Stella-Lethal while learning of her family's past in a way that will change the future. Her relationship with her father, the king, could save the kingdom or destroy it. When an entire kingdom is on the line, the decisions of a few will impact everyone. Action, adventure, and the decision between what is good for you and what is good for all will push everyone to their limits. Who will end up on top, and what will be sacrificed to get there?